The courtroom air was thick with silence, the kind that presses into your skin and makes your heartbeat feel louder than it should. Rows of polished wooden benches stretched beneath the warm glow of antique chandeliers. Lawyers murmured. A bailiff cleared his throat. And in the back row, Sergeant Colin Reyes scanned the crowd with the eyes of a man looking for trouble. He didn't like court duty. Too many rules, too much protocol, and not enough room to handle things the way he was used to. Reyes prided himself on his instincts. He could smell attitude from across a street. And today he believed he'd found it in the form of a well-dressed black woman sitting alone, back straight, chin high, her phone tucked away just as the judge entered. She hadn't done anything wrong, not yet. But Reyes was sure he recognized her. Something about her bothered him. "You there," he said, stepping toward her between rows. "Need you to come with me. No phones allowed and your name's not on the list." The woman blinked, slowly, her lips parting slightly, not in fear but in measured disbelief. "Excuse me?" "Let's go," Reyes barked, already reaching for her arm. That's when everything shifted. Before she could speak again, Reyes gripped her sleeve and yanked it, pulling her halfway out of the bench. A collective gasp rose from the courtroom. She stumbled, heels scraping against the polished floor, eyes wide not in panic but fury. "What the hell are you doing?" someone shouted from the gallery. "I set out," Reyes snapped, completely ignoring the judge's hammering gavel. "You're disrupting proceedings, and I don't care who you think you are." But she wasn't yelling, wasn't crying. She stood, tall, calmly brushing down her blazer as she looked him square in the eye. "Let go of me," she said, her voice smooth and deliberate. "Right now." Reyes was already reaching for his cuffs. The judge rose from the bench. "Sergeant Reyes, stand down immediately." Reyes froze. Every head in the room turned as a sharp voice echoed from the side entrance. A tall, commanding figure in full Navy dress uniform strode in, flanked by two federal marshals. The tension cracked like lightning when the bailiff leaned toward Reyes and whispered urgently, "That's Commander Imani Grant, the DOD liaison. She's here to testify." Reyes felt his stomach drop. Commander Grant didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her posture spoke volumes. "Is this how your department greets its federal witnesses?" she asked, eyes locked on the stunned officer. "With unwarranted aggression and public humiliation?" Reyes stammered. I thought—" "You didn't think," she cut in. "You profiled me, in a federal courtroom. During a human trafficking case I've risked my life to help expose." The silence was deafening now. "I suggest you unhand me before this moment becomes your last in uniform," she said, glancing toward the judge. "Sergeant Reyes," the judge said, voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Release her, now, and remain for a formal reprimand pending internal review." As Reyes pulled back, his face drained of color. Every eye in the courtroom burned into him, some with pity, most with quiet fury. Commander Grant adjusted her blazer once more and stepped forward, not even bothering to look at Reyes again. She took her seat at the witness stand with the elegance of someone who had endured worse and come out stronger. Karma had already begun its work, and it wasn't finished yet. Sergeant Colin Reyes sat stiffly at the far end of the courtroom, just beyond the jury box, hands clasped tightly in his lap. His usual confidence, the swagger, the smirk, the unspoken "I'm in charge," had dissolved like sugar in hot water. Commander Imani Grant hadn't so much as looked his way since taking the witness stand, but he felt her presence like a spotlight on his back. Every word she spoke into the microphone was clear, articulate, and commanding. She was testifying about her role in a covert military operation that had uncovered a trafficking ring stretching from naval ports to civilian transit hubs. Her testimony was the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, and he had tried to arrest her. Reyes clenched his jaw, knowing his actions had just made the evening news. Across the room, Assistant District Attorney Lisa Chen, a rising star with a reputation for precision, kept glancing at Reyes with something between amusement and disgust. Her opening remarks before the court had already included a thinly veiled rebuke of bias in law enforcement compromising due process. Reyes heard it loud and clear. So did the press in the gallery. The judge recessed for lunch and murmurs surged through the courtroom like a current. Reporters filed out, already tapping headlines into phones. A camera crew waited just outside the doors. Reyes tried to sneak out the side, but a court officer stopped him. "The judge wants you to stay. Internal affairs is en route." He nodded, swallowing hard. In the hallway, Commander Grant stepped into the light of a stained glass window, flanked now by 2 Navy legal officers. Her poise was unshakable. Yet as she leaned against the windowsill, one of them asked softly, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said, but there was steel under her calm. "I've been through worse. I'm just tired of it always being the same story." "You want us to file a formal complaint?" She paused, then shook her head. "Let it play out. He's already done the damage himself." Back inside, Reyes sat like a man waiting for a verdict. And in a way, he was. Not a criminal verdict, but something just as career-defining. The courtroom door opened again. A woman in a gray pantsuit entered, carrying a leather folder and wearing a badge clipped to her belt. "Sergeant Reyes?" she said. He stood. "Detective Carla Benitez, Internal Affairs. We need to talk." He glanced around. No backup. No explanation. Just a quiet command, firm and direct, the same tone he'd used on countless civilians. Now it was being used on him. He followed her out through a side chamber, where a small office had been temporarily converted for review. No lawyers, no peers, just him, a notepad, and the woman, opposite the table, clicking her pen twice before starting. "Let me be clear," she began. "There are 2 things I'm investigating. First, your unauthorized detainment of a federal witness in open court. Second, the pattern of complaints from the last 3 years that this incident may now validate." Reyes blinked. "What pattern?" She slid a folder across the table. 8 names, 5 women, 3 black, 2 Latino. Each file contained incident notes, minor complaints dismissed without escalation. Until now. Taken alone, they seemed like overreactions, she said. Taken together, and now placed next to what you just did in a courtroom under cameras, with a federal officer. Well, the pattern speaks for itself. Reyes leaned back, suddenly breathless. "It's not what it looks like." Benitez didn't flinch. "No, Sergeant. This time it's exactly what it looks like." She stood, gathered her papers, and opened the door. "Stay available. You'll be on desk duty pending full review." He didn't respond. Didn't move. Outside the door, Commander Grant passed by again, this time without even glancing at him, and that silence said everything. 2 days had passed since the courtroom incident, and the precinct buzzed with an unease Sergeant Colin Reyes had never experienced before. He walked in that morning expecting business as usual, until he realized he no longer belonged. No one nodded. No one cracked a joke. Even his usual coffee mug was missing from the break room. Desk duty wasn't just a reassignment, it was a statement, a message. And everyone heard it loud and clear. Reyes had crossed a line. At his workstation, a sealed envelope with an official Department of Justice watermark sat waiting. He hesitated before opening it. Inside was a formal memorandum. Notice of pending. Suspension. Conduct review in progress. Across the room, Officer Jenna Park, a rookie he once mentored, passed by without meeting his eyes. She used to seek his advice. Now she acted like he didn't exist. Reyes slumped in his chair, staring at the monitor. He knew how cops treated their own when they screwed up. He'd been part of that culture. The bad apple treatment, the whispers, the cold shoulders. Now it was his turn. He minimized his screen and clicked on a headline someone had left open on another tab. Courtroom chaos. Federal witness. Mistaken for civilian. Officer removed from duty. His face stared back at him, frozen mid-grimace, in a photo someone had taken during the scuffle. Below it, dozens of comments. This is why people don't trust the system. You try to humiliate a black woman on camera and get what's coming. Karma's not always slow. He closed the tab. Meanwhile, across the city, Commander Imani Grant was finishing her testimony. The trial was moving forward, stronger now, bolstered by public support and newfound urgency. The press attention that Reyes had brought on her only added credibility to her cause. Still, she carried the weight of what had happened. The courtroom incident was a distraction, but it also symbolized everything she fought against in uniform: misuse of power, snap judgment, and quiet systemic rot hiding behind badges. At a Pentagon liaison office later that afternoon, she sat across from Rear Admiral Tanya Brooks, who had reviewed the footage. "You want to address it publicly?" Brooks asked. "No," Imani replied. "This isn't about me. It's about how easy it is for someone in uniform to dismiss another, even when we're on the same team." "Still," the Admiral said carefully, "the department's reviewing what support we can give the DOJ on misconduct exposure. You may have sparked something bigger." Imani nodded but kept her focus grounded. Let the truth do the work. He made a choice. Now he lives with it. Back at the precinct, Reyes was called into the captain's office. The door shut behind him with a soft but deliberate click. "Colin," Captain Monroe said, motioning to the chair. "Sit." He did. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This goes beyond what happened in that courtroom. I've got the DOJ, City Council, and 3 civil rights watchdogs breathing down my neck. They've reviewed your body cam archives, and frankly, it's damning." Reyes tried to speak, but Monroe cut him off. "I'm not interested in excuses. What you did undermined public trust and exposed patterns we ignored for too long. You're officially suspended. Pending further investigation, your badge and weapon will be turned in today." Reyes sat frozen. The room blurred slightly. Monroe leaned in. "Let me ask you one thing, Reyes. Why her? Why that moment?" He had no answer. Because he thought she didn't belong? Because she didn't look like someone in charge? Because something about her challenged his sense of control? "I don't know," he whispered. And for the first time in years, Colin Reyes realized he had no idea who he really was without the badge. By Thursday morning, the headlines had evolved from local scandal to national conversation. Commander Imani Grant's face, poised and defiant, was now a symbol of calm dignity in the face of public humiliation. And Sergeant Colin Reyes had become the example no police department wanted to claim. Cable news panels dissected every second of the courtroom footage. One side framed the moment as justice finally being visible. Another argued it was a rare case of karma catching up to unchecked power. But across all screens, one truth emerged. The system had exposed itself, and the world was watching. At her temporary Navy office in the city, Commander Grant sat at a sleek glass desk while her inbox flooded with support, letters, emails, even hand-delivered notes. Veterans, young officers of color, and civilian, allies alike thanked her for not just standing her ground but doing it with grace. A handwritten card in particular caught her attention. The note was simple. "For every time we were told to sit down and say nothing, thank you for standing up. A sister in uniform." Imani held the card tightly. Still, she was no stranger to what came next. The whispers, the subtle resentment, the pushback that always followed when a black woman disrupted the hierarchy. Even in the military, where rank supposedly overruled race, she'd learned long ago that perception carried weight, and hers had just become heavier than ever. Meanwhile, across town, Colin Reyes tried to disappear. He left his house only once that morning to buy groceries. A teenager near the entrance of the store recognized him. "Yo," the kid said. "You're that cop, right? The one who grabbed the Navy lady?" Reyes kept walking. "She owned you, man. Whole world saw it." Inside the store, whispers followed. Him. A woman pulled her child a little closer. A cashier avoided eye contact. Every aisle felt narrower, every shadow longer. When he returned to his apartment, he turned on the news for background noise, only to hear his name again. Suspended officer with prior complaints now under full departmental review. He muted the screen. That evening, Reyes received a call from the Police Benevolent Association. They were withdrawing legal support unless he paid for private counsel. Their reasoning was clear. His actions could not be defended under departmental standards. He hung up before the call ended. At the same time, in a quiet meeting room in D.C., high-ranking officials reviewed a proposal. A new accountability protocol requiring documented bias evaluations for officers involved in federal cases. Commander Grant's incident had given the effort momentum. "This isn't just about one officer," one committee member said. "This is about building in consequences before someone like Reyes ever touches a witness again." The wheels of change were turning, however slowly, but back in the city, Reyes was spiraling. Alone in his apartment, staring out the window, he finally opened his laptop, not to search his own name but to pull up something he hadn't looked at in years: the Police Academy pledge, to serve with integrity, to act without bias, to uphold justice for all people, regardless of race, gender, or status. He read the words 3 times. How far he'd drifted. The next day, Reyes did something he never imagined he would. He requested a meeting with Commander Grant, not to clear his name, not to deflect, but because for the first time he realized he needed to face the one person he had wronged, not as a cop, not as a man desperate to save his reputation, but as someone finally beginning to understand the damage he had done. The meeting took place in a quiet federal building 2 blocks from the courthouse. Commander Imani Grant arrived early, as always, dressed in full uniform. Her presence, even in silence, commanded respect. She stood by the window, arms folded, behind her back watching a city buzz beneath her. She wasn't nervous, she was resolved. At 2 p.m. sharp, the door opened, and Sergeant Colin Reyes stepped inside. Civilian clothes, hands clasped, eyes hollow. For a moment, the room held its breath. They hadn't spoken directly since the courtroom incident. Now there was no audience, no flashing cameras. Just them, 2 people from the same world who had collided at the fault line of judgment and power. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet," Reyes said quietly. Imani didn't move. "You asked, I showed up. That doesn't mean I owe you anything." "I know." Silence stretched between them. Reyes looked down, then met her eyes. "I messed up," he said. "Not just in that courtroom. Before that. A lot of times." She didn't blink. "I thought I had good instincts, that I could read a room, read people. But in that moment, I saw a woman sitting where I didn't expect her to be. And instead of asking who you were, I decided I already knew." He looked away, ashamed. "And I didn't know a damn thing." Imani finally stepped forward, her gaze steady and sharp. "You didn't see a threat," she said flatly. "You saw someone who didn't fit the role you assigned in your head, and you treated me like I didn't belong in a space I earned my way into. That's not just a mistake, that's dangerous." Reyes nodded slowly. "You're right. You put my life at risk, Sergeant, my reputation, in front of the entire court. Had I not been who I am, that moment could have ended very differently." He didn't speak. "What do you want from me?" she asked, voice still calm but now pointed. Reyes exhaled. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it to your face. I was wrong. You didn't deserve it, and I will live with that." For the first time, her expression softened, just slightly, not with sympathy, but with recognition that this wasn't performance. He was unraveling the version of himself he had long protected. "You're not the first to make that mistake," she said, "but most don't get a second chance to face it." She turned to leave, then paused. "Do something with it." Reyes looked up. "If this experience is just a bruise to your ego, nothing changes. But if you use it to understand how deep this goes for you and for others, maybe someone like me won't have to keep proving they belong in their own uniform." She left the room, leaving Reyes with the echo of her words. That evening he sat alone again, but not in silence. He opened an old notebook from his academy days. The first page was blank. He picked up a pen and began to write. Not a statement for review or an excuse to a supervisor, but a letter. "To every person I treated as less because I made assumptions. You didn't know it, but you taught me something. And now it's on me to carry that lesson forward." He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know if his badge would ever be returned. But for the first time in his life, Colin Reyes wasn't hiding behind authority. He was finally beginning to see the truth of who he had become and who he could choose to be. The courtroom was silent as the judge entered, robes flowing, gavel in hand. This time there were no outbursts, no shouting, no chaos, just justice, moving forward. Commander Imani Grant sat in the front row, a commanding presence even out of uniform. She wasn't here as a witness today. Her role in the federal corruption case had concluded, her testimony already etched into the court record with precision and credibility. But her presence was deliberate, not as a reminder of what had happened, but as a quiet symbol of what accountability could look like. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, reporters, supporters, even a few active duty officers who now saw her not just as a colleague, but a catalyst. Meanwhile, former Sergeant Colin Reyes sat in a very different building across town, this time in a community justice forum, surrounded by faces he once avoided. Civil rights advocates, youth leaders, former detainees, and yes, officers, too. He had volunteered to speak, not as an expert, not as a victim of cancel culture, but as someone who had seen what unchecked assumptions could destroy, and who now wanted to understand how to rebuild trust from the ground up. My uniform made me believe I always knew who people were, Reyes said into the microphone. But I didn't know myself, not really. Not until I was forced to listen. There was no applause, just silence. The kind that says, keep going. Back at the courthouse, the judge banged the gavel. This court acknowledges the testimony and conduct of Commander Grant is vital and commendable, she said, and recognizes the structural gaps that allowed a witness of her stature and service to be treated with suspicion instead of respect. The statement was more than ceremonial. It was entered into the permanent record. After the session, a young black woman, maybe early 20s, approached Commander Grant in the hallway. She was a law student, clutching a notepad and a nervous smile. "Ma'am," she said, "I just wanted to thank you for showing us what strength with dignity looks like." Imani smiled gently. "Just make sure when it's your turn at the table, you leave the door open behind you." She left the courthouse without a media statement. She had no interest in becoming a viral moment. Her career was never built on outrage. It was built on resilience, discipline, and grace under fire. But change had begun. The precinct that once protected Reyes without question was now implementing its first officer, bias training, tied directly to incident debriefs, not lip service, actual measurable reform. A new community liaison role had been created, one that Reyes applied for. He didn't know if he'd be accepted, but for once, it didn't matter. He wasn't clinging to the badge. He was chasing something different. Restoration. Purpose without pride. As the weeks passed, the story that once made headlines faded from trending lists. But its impact lingered in quieter ways. A new recruit thinking twice before assuming the worst. A judge reevaluating how courtroom security handled civilian observers. A young black cadet no longer feeling like a guest in their own career. And, somewhere in the city, Commander Imani Grant continued her service. Still sharp, still deliberate, still opening doors. The courtroom chaos that began with one man's assumption had ended with a ripple effect neither of them could have foreseen. Justice hadn't come in the form of punishment alone. It came through clarity, consequence, and transformation.